UFOs, ghosts, ancient civilizations, the supernatural. We may never know the truth about what's really going on, but it sure is fun to speculate.
This is Factor Theory Live with your host, Stephen Crawford.
Good to see you, Michael.
Aloha, Michael. Okay. All right. So this isn't just like Dan and I have talked many times before, and what we do is we throw out a couple topics, and then we just kind of like a round table. So I wrote down a few things that I'd like both of your opinions on, but especially you, Michael, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you. Now, Trump's Space Force. Why do you think he chose now to come out and start the Space Force?
Well, Space Force is something that Trump really began to embrace in early 2018. And I think it was because he was getting briefings on what was really happening in terms of the way in which all of the activities, the covert activities in space, are being run by a cabal, by kind of transnational corporations, with very little transparency, very little oversight, and that there were multiple kind of institutional actors involved in that. So I think what he decided, and probably this was something he was advised by some of his closest advisors, was that there needed to be a kind of central regulatory body set up that could basically make sure that everything that was happening in space was doing so under the proper constitutional authority. And that's the big thing here is that up until recently, and even now, there's a lot of stuff happening in space involving US entities, US agencies, US corporations that are all done without any kind of executive oversight. So I think that's one of the main goals behind Space Force, is to really bring order to that and get control over that, so the executive office has a say in what's happening in space. And I think a second major goal here is to come up with something that could start to disclose to the general public what's really going on, in terms of the advanced technologies that have been developed, that have been used in these secret space programs, and how to roll that out without making it look like all this has been covered up for decades. So I think creating a new military service where one day they just kind of say, well, look at all the new hardware we've got from our corporations, and kind of like hoodwinking the public into thinking, well, this is a new military service, they got this new military hardware, so this is new stuff. There's no apologies needed for hiding this for like decades. This is all new stuff. I think that's a second major goal behind it.
Right. And was there any indication that you know of that Trump was interested in ufology before he became president?
Definitely, yeah. I think he, through his uncle, John Trump, who was a full professor at MIT in the 1930s and 40s, John Trump actually was involved. He was directly involved in the review of Nikola Tesla's papers. And Nikola Tesla did have a lot of inventions there that dealt with things like free energy, electromagnetic propulsion, and these were areas of the direct expertise of John Trump, whose focus was in high voltage electrostatics. He had got his PhD examining Van de Graaff generators, and so this principle of generating a very high voltage electrostatic charge, that's a key principle behind electrogravitics. You look at the Brownfield, the Thomas Townsend Brown kind of invention, the Byfield-Brown effect. That's all based on high voltage electrostatics. So John Trump knew about this, and while he was also a professor at MIT, I think, pretty clearly was involved in the examination of some of the Roswell craft debris. That was some of it was taken to MIT. So we know this, that there are some leaked Majestic documents that actually refer to MIT as one of the institutions involved in reviewing some of the Roswell debris to try and understand how this operated and how it could be reverse engineered. So John Trump was at MIT at the time. In 1947, I think, I mean, he was definitely a full professor. I don't know if he headed, I think he was the head of the specialized unit at MIT dealing with this kind of high voltage electromagnetics, electrostatic charges and so forth.
Right.
So he knew about all of this stuff. So when he retired, he told Trump about it. And Trump actually said there's been a number of interviews that he gave in the 1980s. He said he had a lot of interviews with, or a lot of talks with his uncle, who told him about a lot of nuclear secrets.
Right.
And that's code word for like, okay,
Yeah.
he spilled beans on a lot of stuff.
That's fantastic. And Dan, I know you've dabbled in the world of 0 point. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I totally agree with Michael that, in his position, with his background, in that time frame, it would be highly unlikely that Trump's uncle wasn't brought in on the Roswell situation to, evaluate what that technology was
See,
about.
I didn't know this. I am so glad I've talked to you guys today. I've been trying to get back into it. I spent a couple years out of it, and I had no clue. Fantastic. The next place I wanted to go was time travel. Michael's done some articles about this. Dan and I have talked about this. Michael, do you believe you're a PhD? I meant to ask you, what was that? What field did you get your PhD in?
It was in political science. Actually, I specialized in international conflict, and that's how I got involved in all of this. I was very interested in Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, because I thought that these people that were revealing this cover-up that was worldwide concerning extraterrestrial craft, UFOs, reverse engineering projects and so forth, that was something that could help me better understand what was really going on in the world, where a lot of these international conflicts tend to perpetuate themselves, because I think the conflict internationally is a great way of being able to generate a lot of black budget funding. But a lot of money is generated and sent, whether we're talking about, ripping off oil fields, like at the moment you have the American military in Syria ripping off the oil fields down there in the eastern part of Syria. You've got the poppy fields in Afghanistan or in Vietnam. So, there's a lot of money to be made through these international conflicts. So then, that's why I got drawn into this, because now it made it understandable why these international conflicts perpetuated themselves, why they were so intractable, because there was a deep deep state. There was this entity that was needing huge amounts of money to be generated off the books to feed these black projects, and this could only be done not through the regular appropriations process, which is trackable and recorded on the books. It had to be done through all of these illicit activities, and international conflict was a great way of doing it, because when there's a war or civil war or ethnic conflict, no one keeps books. People are too busy trying to save their lives or make a buck.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that, or even ask Michael about that?
I think Michael's background is like a perfect evolution into what he is doing today. And he's on the cutting edge of, going into these witness testimonies of these people having, 20 and back duties and things. When I partaked in the 2001 National Press Conference, as a top secret military witness that testified, I used to be an ABC newsman, and I thought, 22 cameras in the back row. I couldn't imagine, talking about the bases on the other side of the moon, the nukes being shut down, 57 species, all this. how the world wouldn't be changed from that day forward. But that's what set me on the path
That's what
of
should have happened.
trying to understand how our mainstream media became so organized and controlled to control the perceptions of our public.
There was that speech that Kennedy had given basically to the press saying, look, you're protected by the First Amendment. You're the only profession protected by the First Amendment. We shouldn't be hiding from our mistakes, and I don't want you to cover us up. I want. He said that the public can come to its own very informed decision as long as they are informed, you know, and it's just silly to me that we're still going through those words ring true even today. He's kind of like, you know, George Carlin. All his jokes still stand true today. You just insert different names of politicians, and it's all the same thing. I wanted to dip into the fantastical for a second. I had sent you guys a little video clip and a picture that I have been trying. I even sent out to Snopes. I'm like, is this real? Nobody's debunked it yet. It was the picture of the 33 extra continents and the little video of Admiral Byrd talking about this continent that he saw that was the size of America that nobody else had seen. Did you get a chance to look at that?
I did. I saw that, and yeah, that's Admiral Byrd talking about this land beyond the pole. So he doesn't seem to be talking about the South Pole at all, which, you know, everyone knows is kind of almost twice the size of the continental US. He's talking about a land beyond the poles. That and this is so, you know, this was Byrd basically revealing that there was an entryway into the South Pole where you would enter these territories that were huge. You know, some people talk about the inner Earth as being you know, this vast kind of like that the Earth is like a geode, and inside it there's this vast kind of empty space. Others talk about the honeycomb Earth.
Yeah, like
where
a porous
you
Earth.
have huge areas down there, but the Earth is layered like a honeycomb, and so you have multiple huge caverns, some of them as big as states. So you know, whichever model you go with, I think that there is something as you enter through some portal down there at the South Pole and at the North Pole, you enter into the inner Earth, and that's when you start to encounter these vast new territories that are very habitable, and there's civilizations in there.
Right. And what do you have anything to add to that, Dan? Do you you know obviously about the Hollow Earth theory? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Astrophysicist Kip Thorne came up with the wormholes that are one's below Antarctica, one's above Alaska. You know, my small testimony was about, you know, whatever craft there is, they're coming out of the ocean up near Alaska, and she was going 7,000 miles per hour, you know, in official secret Navy reports. Apparently, you know, and it's interesting, the Russian documentary too, talking about most of the personnel down in Antarctica are mostly CIA, NSA. You know, I was going to work down there in isolation for a whole year. I had all the qualifications and everything, but I had a little glitch in my military career, so they can't have that. So, yeah, they're definitely the whole wormhole physics is something that I'm sure we're going to be understanding a whole lot more in the future when all this is disclosed.
Well, Linda Moulton Howe had come out. She'd done an interview with a gentleman who claimed to be a pilot down there, and they were sent to pick up someone who was injured. And on the way back, they didn't think the guy was going to make it, so they actually went the no-fly zone, and they saw this massive hole that I don't know how to describe it other than, you know, slightly concaved in, and it was the size of a football field at least. So, and this isn't new, because we've all heard about Project High Jump as well. That happened, right? That is documented. Project High Jump was a documented expedition down there at the very least. It
Yeah,
was
Byrd
done.
went publicly and even said the nature of the mission is military, quote unquote.
And now, was it also documented that they had lost ships and planes, or was that added later by others?
Well, Byrd did give an interview coming back from Antarctica, where he stopped off in Santiago, Chile, and he gave an interview to a journalist called Lee Van Atta. And Lee Van Atta wrote an article basically summarizing what Byrd had told him. And so Byrd had told him that that there were casualties, and that there was a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole, and that the United States needed to face a very uncertain future with this new enemy. And what I believe he was referring to was the Antarctica-based German colony that had successfully weaponized flying saucers, and that they were now able to fly around the planet very quickly, and obviously into outer space, because in order to break the Earth's velocity and to travel to the moon, you need to have craft that could exceed 40,000 kilometers per hour. And so the Germans did succeed in building some of these craft, like the Hannibal 3 craft. It had an escape velocity of, it could reach speeds of 40,000 kilometers an hour or so. So it could go out into outer space. And obviously, if you're traveling at 40,000 miles an hour, you could travel from pole to pole, very, very quickly. And Byrd was referring to this and basically saying that this was a big threat. There have been a lot of rumors about a number of ships that were lost by the fleet. We do know officially that there was one, I think it was some surveillance craft, whether it was a P3 Orion or something like that, that was lost. Maybe it was a predecessor of that. Or maybe a DC-3, I think probably something that was used for surveillance. That was lost down in Antarctica. But according to a lot of multiple sources, a number of ships were sunk. All of the aircraft associated with Operation High Jump were destroyed. So that would make sense in terms of Byrd's warning when he was in Chile of this new enemy and of the US high jump expedition suffering significant casualties.
Right.
Before he went back to Washington, being a 33rd degree Freemason, they keep secrets pretty well. It's pretty sad what happened. It was James Forrestal, the Secretary of Navy, that sent Admiral Byrd down there. And as the MJ-12 report that got leaked, that is unfortunate about his death, I was about 1 month old when he was thrown out the window. It seems the other MJ-12 members did not want to go along with the whole idea of disclosing this to the American public, as I think Kennedy was on the same page as Forrestal, and so they had to eliminate him, which is very unfortunate.
He was even in, I think it was yesterday's episode of Project Blue Book, the television show. They've worked him into that as well. There was also a lot of theory and conjecture that he and the president of Russia had come to an agreement and wanted to disclose, wanted to demilitarize to some degree at least, and that was part of the reason the Russian president stepped down, and also one of several good reasons that the CIA and even Zionists had to want to keep JFK shut up permanently.
Right, well, JFK was a very critical figure in US history because I think he truly did want to get control of all of this secret UFO data and extraterrestrial visitation, and basically release that eventually to the public. But I think JFK, he was more interested in having executive oversight. People often look at JFK and say, well, he was kind of like wanting to reveal all this to the public, and that he died with a speech in his pocket that he was going to reveal, basically a disclosure speech revealing to the public. Well, I think that's not accurate. That's not the way JFK operated, and the way in which a high-level politician like him would operate. I think he thought in terms of like strategic moves, and the first move was to basically have the CIA be forced to share all of its UFO files with NASA, with the State Department, and with the Department of Defense, and that would then go on to the Russians. That was how Kennedy wanted to circumvent this control system that had been set up by Majestic 12. Bring the Russians in, and that way you can justify why all of this classified UFO data could be shared with the State Department and with the different agencies within the Department of Defense. And that was something that the CIA and the Majestic 12 group were totally against, because they wanted to keep it out of the hands of other bureaucracies like the State Department and the Department of Defense, Pentagon, and so forth, because they truly threatened the power of MJ12 and the CIA. And and you see this with Colonel Fletcher Prouty and his book, The Secret Team. The big battle was always between the covert operators, that is the CIA, and the special operations in the US military. It was always this fight between them in terms of like who should be running the show when it comes to covert operations. And so Kennedy understood this, and so he wanted to kind of get the control of the UFO files out of the hands of the CIA and put it in the hands of people who would share the data responsibly amongst the different branches of the military. But he ultimately lost that power struggle. If he had succeeded, I think if that data had been shared with the State Department and with NASA and so forth, then I think everything would have been set for maybe during his second administration, Kennedy making some kind of public disclosure about extraterrestrial life and these advanced technologies that were being reverse engineered.
It's sad. It's really sad. You can say whatever you want about JFK's personal life, but that does not negate the fact that he did want the best for the world, not just America, for the world, especially when it came to this information. Dan, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, and he fired Alan Dulles, and Aaron Dulles, as you research back through history, is so infamous in so many different aspects. He was even the one that was pushing Truman to convert the wartime OSS into the CIA, and Truman, 1 month after the Kennedy assassination, he publicly said, the CIA, is off doing its own thing. They don't have to account to anybody, He expressed his concern about it, and when you look into the history and the fact that they effectively infiltrated and took over our perceptions of our education system, and our media with Mockingbird, and the infiltration with Hollywood, creating our perceptions about extraterrestrial life. They did one hell of a job of creating this matrix of perception that they wanted to create in order to hide their illegal operations, keeping the rest of the planet technologically retarded using these obsolete technologies. While they developed anti-gravity back in the 30s.
They have a breakaway civilization. I totally believe that. It makes perfect sense. And the fact that Phil Schneider was killed shortly after coming out and talking about the underground civilization he was hired to build, and even invented a new drill or something for part of it. He was a co-designer at least.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because there is a very important addendum to this, because Dan actually did mention James Forrestal, who was the Secretary of the Navy during the time of Operation High Jump, and then became the very first Secretary of Defense. And he was also part of the initial group that had set up the Majestic 12 Committee. Now, Forrestal and John F. Kennedy were very close. Forrestal actually took Kennedy to Germany in June and July of 1945, immediately after Germany's collapse, and showed Kennedy all of the secret technologies that the Nazis had been working on. And so he fully briefed Kennedy because he wanted Kennedy to join his staff. And it was only after Kennedy decided to enter politics that Forrestal gave up on Kennedy joining his staff. But the important thing was that Kennedy had been told about the Germans setting up a space program in Antarctica. So Kennedy knew all about this. And also another important fact is that Joe Kennedy, Kennedy's father, he was a Nazi supporter during the war. I mean, he actually, after he was basically removed as ambassador to England, he made donations to the German National Nazi Party. And so Joseph Kennedy was a big supporter. And so during the 1960 presidential election, people are familiar that Joe Kennedy made deals with the mafia, and that was kind of like instrumental in his son getting elected. But Joe Kennedy also made deals with the Nazis out of Antarctica. Basically,
a lot of them
hey,
did back then, right?
My boy's running for the presidency, and I'll vouch for him, and we'll do what needs to be done. So that's important to understand the background to Kennedy. So, but of course, Joe Kennedy, suffers a stroke. He loses all influence in the Kennedy administration. So, from the perspective of the mafia and the perspective of the German Antarctica base, President Kennedy goes rogue and tries to kind of like get control of things and tries to bring people to account. So, we need to bring in the German Antarctica colony as a factor in the eventual assassination.
Right, and this all the setup for that base that took place before the war, right? Down in Antarctica, the Germans. They actually went down there before the start of the war and took a bunch of people and engineers and equipment and the whole shebang. And then they started their gradual takeover. So one would assume there's a lot of people who would say, there was one debunker, he thought it was the idea of them having a base down there was just stupid because it was so far away from the theater of war, and that they should have done it somewhere like Greenland, and that the reason that was his reasoning, was it was too far away. I'm like, really? Why would they have a secret base in amongst the theater of war? It makes perfect sense to go down south. So the debunkers, man,
Well, there's some historical documents that show that the Germans did have bases. I mean, in 1938-39, you had the Schwabenland expedition to Antarctica.
Right, they dropped
flags.
And then
in June of 1939, this is 3 months before the war, you actually had President Roosevelt approving Admiral Byrd to organize a task force to go down to Antarctica to find the German bases.
Right.
So in 1939, in June, Roosevelt had given orders to Byrd to go down there to find the bases. So, those debunkers that say, well, where's the evidence of the bases? It's like, well, that's nonsense. Why would President Roosevelt order Admiral Byrd to go down to Antarctica to find the German bases to make sure they weren't violating the Monroe Doctrine? If he didn't know, of course they had good intel. They knew the Germans had set up bases down there and that they were building these up for the war effort. And so as far as Roosevelt was concerned, he just wanted to make sure that the Germans weren't violating the Monroe Doctrine by doing it in the western hemisphere of Antarctica. And of course the Germans did it in New Schwabenland, which technically is not part of Antarctica. So it was outside of the Monroe Doctrine.
Right. Dan, did you have anything to add to that story about everything that's going on down there?
Well, it's interesting. The gentleman sitting next to me at the press club was Navy Commander Graham Bethune, who was actually the pilot that flew Admiral Byrd down to Antarctica. Nice. And I had lunch with him. I had, at the time, my ignorance level was quite high on all of this, and I was just learning about this. I wish I would have known so much more back then to ask so many questions.
Right, hindsight, right? Yeah.
Well, that's a very important point there, Dan, because I know that Colonel Donald Ware said that he was told by Graham Bethune that Graham flew Admiral Byrd down to Antarctica in the summer of 1945-46, that's the Southern Hemisphere summer, to basically conduct secret negotiations with the Germans down there. So you're
That's
saying that Commander Bethune told you directly as well that he flew Admiral Byrd down to Antarctica?
When I was with him, we didn't speak about that. I researched it later, that he was involved with being his pilot.
Yeah, that would have been sweet if only he had told you then, eh? There'd be another reason to try to get you on Ancient Aliens. All right. Now, I wanted to go into today's virus. Do you guys personally know anyone who is suffering from this illness?
No, I don't.
No. Have you heard of anyone, a friend of a friend, your cousin's hairdresser's brother, anything like that? No, eh?
No.
So what do you think this is all about? Because we've been through so much, and never have we had a pandemic called over the common cold. And people can say what they want. Maybe it is a stronger version of it. Fine. The main people it's going to go after are people like me and seniors, but that's what the flu and this virus tends to go after anyway. We've got people hoarding...
Compromised immune systems. Yeah, you could be
Right.
young or old. It doesn't matter. If your immune system's compromised, you're going to take a bad effect.
But it amounts to, from what I can see, there is no more people dying from this than there has been from the flu every single year. And the way that everybody's... I think that they're deciding, hey, should we cut this off now and get everybody back to work, or it's working so great, should we just roll with it and continue with the plan for our new world order? Do you guys have any opinions on that?
Yeah, well, the thing that immediately caught my attention, and of course everyone's attention when the virus broke out in Wuhan, China, was how the Chinese basically quarantined and shut down factories and schools and all their production. So I think at one point you had close to 500 million people on lockdown, and all these factories over China closing and their economy basically crashing as a result of that. And so that to me was a sign that this was very, very serious, because I couldn't imagine the Chinese, basically hyping something up and crashing their economy. What would be the purpose behind that? So
The
I think
protests.
the Chinese
The protests, I
understood
believe.
that this was something that was very serious, and I think they kind of realized that it was a bioweapon. That was the thing. It was a bioweapon released out of Wuhan. Exactly how? I mean, there's a lot of debate over that. Whether this was a Chinese, a BSL laboratory in Wuhan that kind of let the virus out, or it could have been maybe the deep state kind of like orchestrating the release of a bioweapon, or it could have been, the US military, rogue actors in the US military, releasing this bioweapon in October of 2019 at the World Military Games that were also held in Wuhan. And also you had 5G. So all of these things create this kind of cloud of uncertainty as to what exactly is going on. But what I thought was very significant was this whistleblower that Kerry Cassidy and Paul and I've forgotten his name.
Bill Ryan.
Bill Ryan.
Bill
Thanks.
Ryan.
Yeah, Bill Ryan. They found this whistleblower in 2010, a former British naval officer who says that he then began working in the city of London and came across this deep state plan that would start with a contrived war against Iran, that would go nuclear, that would suck in Israel, that would suck in China, that would get the US involved, and that would go nuclear, leading to millions of lives lost. And that would then lead into the second step, which would be this biological warfare, where China would basically get the flu, and then it would spread worldwide, leading to millions of fatalities. And then the third step in that was there was going to be a pole shift, and that was altogether, those three steps in that sequence would lead to basically a 50% reduction in the population of humanity. That was the goal, according to this plan that the City of London officials were trying to basically put into action back in 2005. This was when the whistleblower says the meeting occurred. In 2010, that's when he came out and told Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy about this. Now, of course, we know that the war against Iran never happened. There were people like Admiral William Fallon who blocked it during the Bush administration, and then Obama blocked it during his administration, and Trump has been blocking it ever since. So, because that critical first step in that kind of plan didn't happen, I think what it was that the deep state decided, well, this is not going to happen, so let's go to stage 2 and hope for the best. And stage 2 was to release this biological weapon against China, watch it go worldwide, and somehow hope that would be enough for their plan to move forward. But I think that, in the plan, the problem was that, because you had this first stage that would be a nuclear war, China, Russia, the Middle East, major nations like the US, their resources would have been depleted. They wouldn't have been able to handle a biological weapon. Whereas now, without this kind of antecedent nuclear war, China, Europe, the United States, other countries have all of their resources available to contain this biological weapon and to basically make sure the coronavirus is contained and eventually...
And another possibility is this dark evil thing that has happened to the planet could have been used to totally flip 180 degrees and being used to round up all of the dark players with the white hats during this quarantine period.
Right, there's that as well, because when you think about it, I was just saying, I went out the other night and there were no kids anywhere, there were no teenagers anywhere. I wasn't seeing crime. What I was seeing was seniors walking down the street with each other, laughing, joking, like they took back the night. It was incredible. And we're getting, aside from all the spraying that's been going on, there's no planes aside from those other ones. There's no boats going, well, not as many. Definitely not as much pollution coming from cars. The air's a little bit cleaner. The water's a little bit cleaner. It almost seems like this is something we should do once a year for a month, just to help clean the air around the planet and the water even. Now,
I love living independently up here in the mountains off the grid, and it seems the lifestyle is more appropriate all the time. I had a question, on exopolitics.org. There's a new witness that came out, Air Force intelligence specialist Mike Tuber, talking about the Tic Tac from the Nimitz 2004 event that, the To the Stars Academy, the Pentagon Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, whatever it's called, went to the New York Times and then went across all of the mainstream media outlets to get this out all over the place, kind of insinuating that this is ET, when all along it's actually the Air Force Secret Space Program working with the Navy, probably testing out its radar systems, and while the Navy sailors are freaking out, not knowing what this is, only a few on the inside really know that this is actually a joint Air Force Navy operation. But it's just interesting that they have this whole Pentagon program that is kind of questionable, which has gotten extreme media coverage, and they continually use the term an alien, threat. They use the word threat continually, and we know that They had programs way before this that we're planning on creating a false flag extraterrestrial
Right.
event.
I was just going to go there.
Going back to a report from Iron Mountain, Werner von Braun's deathbed testimony, the Benson Strategy Group, which Michael knows very well. They're planning on creating a something like this. But why would the Navy allow them to use that footage and support that type of
Exactly.
using it for their media?
Right. I was going to ask you, isn't that a scary thing? Because you told me that it was the Navy and Eisenhower had set up something with the Navy in case people tried to subvert the Constitution, and that's essentially what they're protecting Trump and stuff now. So you tell me that the Navy's working with the Air Force, 3 drops of pee come out. I'm like, what's going on?
Well, this new witness, Mike Turber, he's important because he actually was told back in 2005 about the Tic Tac incident. I mean, he first heard about it from one of his sources in the US Air Force that was working on putting together some PowerPoint slides for a classified meeting that was being held at a think tank that involved the Navy, the Air Force, DARPA, and the contractor that had built the Tic Tac craft. And so Turbo basically said that this was known to the Navy, this was known to the Air Force. It wasn't an unknown, it wasn't a UFO at all. They knew all along that this was a Air Force craft that was being tested against the Navy's best the best surveillance and intercept technologies at the time.
Right.
And so it happened during these Navy exercises off the coast of San Diego down there, and basically they were wanting to see whether or not this Tic Tac could kind of like operate without any kind of undue problems presented by the Navy's state-of-the-art surveillance technologies and radar and intercept technologies. And so this was something that Turba began to reveal when he came forward. And there's been a lot of hostility towards him by those that have been following the Tic Tac
of course
phenomenon, because they want it to be this kind of like unknown UFO, possibly extraterrestrial, that could be a threat. And of course the Academy, to the Stars Academy, they've been really hyping up this, as Dan was saying, this threat element, and basically they don't want to kind of acknowledge that this is actually secret Air Force stuff, and that the Navy
it'd be an
wants this
embarrassment
to
if
come
they
out.
did acknowledge it.
And I think Turba's being encouraged to come forward. I mean, he's the way he says it, he's being quietly encouraged. And actually, I got a chance to interview him, so I did get to speak to him, and I actually have an article that I'm working on, based on our interview, which hopefully will come out, if not tomorrow, probably on Saturday. So, there I go into detail in this 2005 meeting, and what was discussed there, and why it's important in answering the whole Tic Tac phenomenon, which the major media has played up, but none of the major media have approached Turba yet. But I think that's because the major media really doesn't want to go too deeply into this. They want to focus on the sensationalist. While this could be a UFO extraterrestrial threat rather than some kind of secret technology that the Navy and the Air Force are wanting to roll out.
Right, and they consider aliens as threat. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I was just saying, it's so suspicious with so many red flags with, the whole in bed together with this Pentagon program and To the Stars Academy and the mainstream media outlets where, all the members of the To the Stars Academy is, CIA, Lockheed, Air Force, and, they're actually asking for money to try to develop these technologies when Ben Rich said anything you can imagine, we already know how to do.
Right.
And we already know there's so much witnesses and evidence that they've got advanced technology. So it's a defrauding the public at the first issue, and so it's very suspicious and to be questioned. This whole in-bed relationship with To the Stars, and I always question. My focus has always been on how the mainstream media has been used against us in forming our perceptions, and who they ridicule, who they ignore, and who they propagate and expand.
Right.
It's very important to pay attention who the mainstream media, because their agenda is set. I believe ever since 1954 with the first Nazi SS, Bilderberg meetings, and they set those agendas every year for the 6 corporations that control our perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Well, even through movies and music, they all own the entertainment industry, and I would be referring to the Zionists and some of the people who have also become like your Rockefellers and Rothschilds. It's funny to me that nobody that was voting for these people realized these guys are billionaires. They own all kinds of businesses. Maybe we shouldn't have them. Of course, you want a businessman running a company, and we know that's what America is. It became a corporation, unfortunately, and it's just I don't know, man. It boggles my mind, the things that a lot of people will just let slip by. They don't think twice about it. They don't go, hey, wait a minute, now that doesn't sound right. They just go, well, on to the next one. What time's the hockey game start? And well, there's something that's going to break out very soon. Now, apparently in Canada, I'm hearing they're getting ready to shut down the beer and liquor stores. We have to go to a beer and a liquor store to get alcohol. We can't just go to a grocery store or a corner store. When that happens, you're looking at a riot here in Canada. You're going to have guys running around the streets with hockey sticks, pulling each other's jerseys over their heads and just pounding on each other. Where's your beer? Give me your beer. And it's going to be a fun situation. Do you guys see an end in sight to any of this?